Finally, we're going to, here you go. I'm going to hand this over to Jeff Gloyd. He's the VP of Sales and Marketing at URT. So we have now a recycler's perspective, a Tier 1 recycler, and he's responsible for all sales strategy, revenue growth, and marketing-related activities for the company. So Jeff, please.
Thank you, Dennis. Can you hear me? Pretty good? All right. And can you see me and us? All right, the lighting choice is perfect then. We're right up here. I want to start just briefly to reflect, if I can. About a year ago to this date, I was standing on stage just like this one at this conference talking about the issues surrounding flat panel recycling. At that time, it was about 2 weeks after Hurricane Harvey, Houston, where I actually live. Of course, a few hundred miles to our east, we've got Hurricane Michael hitting right now. So let's be thinking and conscious about how we can help them recover after that. But let's also help the East Grab folks who've done a great job here possibly consider moving this to the west and to the north for future events. Just saying. And then we'll get to the presentation. I'll be talking about navigating from the middle of the state legislatures writing laws and the EPA's enforcing those laws and the manufacturers trying to be compliant with those laws. And processors like ourselves are really in the middle, managing and trying to understand and build a business around understanding the nuances of the laws, on building relationships and networks with collectors and residents and counties and states, and also building relationships with OEMs who have their own goals. Some of them are like TCL, some of them are not, and then there's some in the middle. And if it was an easy process for processors like us, there'd be a lot more of us at the conference, and you know what I'm talking about, right? That's the negative. The positive is there are certainly ways to do it and do it well and meet the letter of the law, be compliant, build relationships with regulators and with OEMs while being a solvent business, being around today, and most of our partners want us to be around in 5 years. So how do we do this? Here's some background, dozens of laws. You've heard the rest of the panel that did a wonderful job talking about the laws. There are dozens of laws, and they vary quite significantly, as most of you already know. Anna Marie and Amanda presented a couple of the states. Both of their states require recycling of electronics for residents, and that's where the similarities end. Pretty much across the board, different after that fact. It's the job of processors like us and others to understand that and be able to provide that same level of service to residents to meet that law while navigating the differences amongst these two and 24 other laws. Working with OEMs. There are hundreds of OEMs. There are about 5 to 10 that are of significant volume when you look at most state legislation and allocations within those states. But in reality, there are hundreds of OEMs that in many of these states qualify and require some level of service. It may be 1,000 pounds, it might be 5,000 pounds, or it may be 5 million pounds or 10 million pounds. And then you get to collectors. So there's thousands of collectors, hundreds of OEMs, thousands of collectors. So who could be a collector? Well, it could be at a processor's location. We could have collection sites and set up our own bins, which processors do. It could be recycling centers. It could be drop-off centers at retailers like Goodwill, like Salvation Army, like Best Buy, like name a retailer. Many of them take this material and have for a long time. And certainly county and city programs and recycling centers. And then there's national, regional, and local processors. So there's still a number of processors like ourselves that are national and have the ability to service just about every state or zip code in the country. But we compete against those that are regional, that have a site in 1 or 2 states, and local who have a site in a city, who also want to participate in these programs and have relationships and be solved forward. So what's the positive? How do we make this work from a processor's perspective and help the OEMs meet the requirements that they need? So the first is relationships, I'd say, with regulators. And that starts with understanding the law. So, I kind of poked fun about the differences of Minnesota and California, but it's an important nuance. If processors don't understand those differences, don't respect those nuances, and approach those laws in those states with a closed mind, it'd be very difficult to be successful, very difficult to meet the standards. So understanding those laws, and just for perspective, I'm sure most of you already know this, but just looking at covered devices. What's considered a covered device in a state varies so widely from almost everything with a cord would be considered a covered device to just TV and IT equipment, including printers. And then there's some that are TVs and IT equipment, so computers, laptops, monitors, but not printers, and peripherals, but only if that keyboard or mice is delivered with a covered PC. And that's in just one state too. So trying to navigate all of that is important to making it successful. Also, the regulators, we don't look at them as the enemy, if you will. They're our partners. Their job is to help us do our job well and help us make sure that we're meeting the standards within that state. So that's a relationship as well. It's the same level of relationship as going out and sell our services to a business or sell our services to an OEM or develop a collector network. We need to have close relationship with the regulators, so we're working together to ensure that the law is being met and that we're providing the level of service that they need us to provide. Collection and downstream reporting, that's all part of it. The amount of reporting, tracking, how that reporting is done, whether it's monthly or quarterly or annually, whether it's done online or in hard copy, those vary widely as well. You need to understand that and work with the regulators to make sure that the reports are accurate and timely. And then relationships with OEMs. So I like to say a holistic solution, because many OEMs, like TCL, want to do more than just what's prescribed to them. And that holistic approach to not just managing the allocation that they must cover in the state of Wisconsin or Pennsylvania or New York or California or wherever it may be, but also provide additional services. So they have return goods that might need to be managed. They have material coming out of their corporate offices that might need to be managed. They have special projects that they might need to be managed on recalls and things like that. They might have voluntary programs. Jonathan mentioned the voluntary programs that his company's working on. And mailback is a big portion of that. If you want a 50-state solution, having a mailback solution needs to, in most cases, be part of that. And then compliance and brand protection. All these OEMs are big companies. All these OEMs need to be their brands need to be respected. And if we don't provide the service, if we do something that's outside of state compliance, if we get caught cheating the system, double billing pounds, not moving material, not processing glass the way it needs to be processed, if any of those things happen, that can reflect significantly negative on our partners, who are fairly large companies, and that's important to us, and it's important to other processors who have successful legislative relationships, compliance relationships. And then cost control, and there's no getting around it. I'll just be blunt. Cost does matter. In a competitive market, when you have hundreds of OEMs and you have thousands of or hundreds of processors, and they're national, they're regional, and they're local, price does matter. And the important thing is that when we're looking at price to OEMs and we're trying to build that relationship, that the value that the OEM gets is for actually meeting the standards, right? So we need to price the network from a processor standpoint accurately, so that we're not underpricing the market and cheating the system, providing the solutions that the OEMs are required under the law. So I'm going through mine pretty quick because we have run over a little bit, so this is my last slide. So how do we ensure that we're going to be successful? And I'd say, first of all, from a processor's perspective, we need to exceed standards. So that's the external standards. This is the letters written in the statutes. This is the, if you are a certified company, you know, the standards in e-Steward or R2, or a private standard developed by an OEM consortium group. We need to exceed those standards. We need to make sure that if a company's expecting us to do something, that we actually do it, and we do it with transparency. I think that's key to success. Managing costs. This we own as processors. You probably hear a lot of whining from processors about commodity values, you know, sucking, which they usually do. There's a little whine, we call it that, right? Or having staffing issues. It's hard to find staff. Or the OEMs don't pay us enough. Or there's too many audits we have to do. Or whatever the issue may be, it's on us to be able to manage that and manage it efficiently. If we don't, then we won't be around. We won't be good partners. We won't be helping the OEMs be compliant under the law. So managing costs is everything to make sure that we're staffed properly, that our production hits the level that it needs to every single day, that our equipment is running efficiently, and really, almost most importantly, that on the back end of our operations, when we're shipping material out, we're getting the best value or the lowest cost to actually recycle and process that material, whether it be plastic or glass disposal or copper-bearing material or boards. We need to make sure that it meets the standards to get us the best value, and that's on us. Because if we're getting the best value, then we can provide the best value as well. And that kind of is what we're talking about creating value, and then pricing the market effectively. When it comes to these legislative programs, you heard a couple significantly different models here, where Minnesota collectors can actually be charged still in some cases. In California, they can't, right? So how do we as a processor operate in states that don't allow charging versus those that do allow charging, and what is that difference? How much of that, the cost of recycling gets pushed onto the consumer or the collector, tax levy from city, landfill, whatever it may be, and how much of that cost is being pushed on to the OEM, and how much of that value are we generating on the back end of our operation selling commodities. That's the mix that we're constantly dealing with, and it varies by state depending on what the law allows, and making sure that that piece that the OEM owns is the accurate piece for that state. Because if it's not, it's hard to recover that value from the collectors, and it's hard to recover that value from the commodities. And that's all I have. Appreciate your time.